Welcome back to LimQ Plus, everyone. On this channel, I'm 100%ing Breath of the Wild by a bit every day until the sequel, Tears of the Kingdom, comes out, which is today. In 135 days, we got another nice even number, in my opinion, getting closer to the 120 mark, which is exciting, because that means we're getting closer and closer to only 4 months until the game. I want to rant a little bit about what is, in my opinion, Breath of the Wild's biggest weakness today. This is also slightly from someone in the comments yesterday that wanted me to discuss something similar. And again, in case if you're confused about what I'm actually doing as far as gameplay is concerned, I'm basically running through the 100% speedrun route, making sure that I'm not forgetting any Korok seeds that I potentially have missed running through the game initially, making my way up to that 100% mark. So, what is the biggest weakness in Breath of the Wild? Different people have different opinions. Some people might say it's the music, they don't like the soundtrack enough, it's not euphoric or like intense enough for them. For other people, it's the missing dungeons. They are missing the traditional Zelda dungeons, and that's not super far away from what I consider the game's biggest weakness. But for me, it is the game's bosses. So, unfortunately, in my opinion, again, in Breath of the Wild, we don't have a lot of boss variety. We have the Blight Ganons. Basically, at the end of every Divine Beast, every major plot device ends in having us fight one of those Blight Ganons, which are basically the same boss again and again. Yes, they have slightly different designs and they have slightly different attack patterns, but for the most part, it's, at least visually, a similar boss. And that gets really boring. I've been thinking recently about what I want more from Tears of the Kingdom. Do I want real dungeons to come back, quote-unquote real dungeons? Or would I rather have different bosses? And as much as I've said in the past that I don't want shrines to return in Tears of the Kingdom, and I do want quote-unquote real dungeons, I still agree with that, but I think having shrines actually added a lot to the replayability in Breath of the Wild. Because I always guarantee you, if you've done exactly 2 casual playthroughs of the game, there's almost no way that you've solved every single shrine the same way twice. I don't think that's how that works. There's so many different solutions to how to beat a shrine. I personally have made a video on my main channel about beating the same shrine in 40 different ways. And there's probably even more ways I could have done if I spent even more time labbing out different methods on how to beat the shrine. But that just goes to show for me how these shrines make it so that your experience, at least casually, is going to be different every time you play through the game. And while dungeons kind of offer that, for the most part, not really. If I'm thinking about dungeons in Skyward Sword, and even in the Divine Beast in this game, most of the time you will have to complete the puzzles in them the same way. And while that's fun for your first casual playthrough when it comes to longevity and replayability, I don't think it's as strong. Again, I think you can make dungeons with a different approach, kind of like the shrines in this game, where there is different solutions on how to beat them. And something that kind of tried to do that is the final trial in the DLC, right? The 5th dungeon. Unfortunately, in the speedrun, we skipped that dungeon entirely. Also, I do have to start this quest. Otherwise, I'll never be able to get the shrine out of the ground and will never be able to get its location. But, yeah, unfortunately, you skipped the entire final trial in the speedrun because of specific circumstances where you're able to reach the boss fight, which is one of the strongest bosses in Breath of the Wild, Monk Mascotia. By just going out of bounds and making your way to the arena. It's a very strange but cool looking skip. I don't know if you've ever seen it. If not, type in final trial skip or final dungeon skip Breath of the Wild. You'll be mind blown. But yeah, so I don't think this game not having dungeons is its biggest weakness. This was just a big lead up to me saying I do think the biggest weakness is the bosses. And I want to rant about several complaints I have about them. So first of all, the Blight designs are boring. For the first Blight might be cool, but then, okay, yeah, this Blight has a different weapon, this Blight has a spear, this Blight has a sword, this Blight has a gun, and then Calamity Ganon has all weapons at the same time. Thematically, it makes sense. But it gets boring. The fights itself are kind of cool. Thunderblight, in my opinion, being the best because of its difficulty. It at least gives you some sort of challenge, but I think this is a complaint that many people had. The bosses feel a little bit too easy. And in the late game, unfortunately, this doesn't get better. If you prepare properly for Calamity Ganon, he is basically a pushover. In Master Mode, the fight is basically not balanced, for the simple reason that when Calamity Ganon goes to the wall and is starting to regen health, it just feels kind of unfair and not really fun. It just feels... We talked about Master Mode on this channel before. It feels like a non-play-tested mode that has some issues. And then Dark Beast, we don't have to talk about Dark Beast. Dark Beast, while epic in terms of music and visual presentation, it is a pushover. It's basically a glorified cutscene, and it's... maybe not the best way they could have ended the game. Now, Monk Mascotia, on the other hand, is a really cool boss fight. Amazing soundtrack, cool attack patterns, big difficulty. Definitely, they nailed it with that one. I recommended the DLC multiple times on this channel. Play the DLC. It has some of the best content in the game, the best bosses, the best dungeons, the best shrines. Absolutely do so. But I'm not gonna... That's not enough to carry the entire game's boss design. Another complaint that I have is... I mean... we're almost done, right? There's not that many bosses left. The other main bosses in the game are Master Koga and... wait, is that really it? I'm trying to think if there's anything else of like a big boss. I'm not counting mini bosses right now. I'm going to talk about them in a second. But let me think. I might be forgetting something obvious. All of the Blights, Calamity, Dark Beast. Master Koga is the only thing. I mean, Master Koga is basically a joke boss, right? Then we got a ton of mini-bosses. And I really think I have to miss something right now, something obvious, but I actually don't think I am. That's basically it for the game's bosses. And I know that was not the game's, like, big focus. I feel really stupid right now because I feel like I have to be missing something. In the DLC, you refight the Blights again. So technically, if you first go to Hyrule Castle, beat the game, then beat the Blights and the Divine Beast and refight them, you can fight them, like, 3 times each. Trust the Sword? No, I think that's really it. And then there's the Monk, which is actually a great boss, but also the only one. The other problem I have is the game's mini-bosses. There is, in my opinion, too many of them, not enough variety, and there's one specific thing that really annoys me. So, in 100% we actually have to fight all of them, what the game considers mini-bosses. But the question is, what does the game consider mini-bosses? And the answer is... there's 4 Moldugas, 40 Hinoxes, and 40 Stone Taluses. The Stone Taluses are boring. Oh, okay, by the way, the DLC technically has, that's what I forgot, Moldu King and a big Lava Talus, but it's like not really different. But essentially, okay, so the Stone Taluses are boring. The only variety that they have is that they're either frozen, or they are on fire, or they have a different ore on top. You get the idea very quickly. They're not very interesting. The Hinoxes at least have variety in the sense that they're Stalnoxes, which actually makes fighting them feel different. They are actually super annoying though. Not a very fun fight. We have a speedrun strat now finally where we can actually one-shot them, but I wouldn't call them a very fun boss fight. And then the other Hinox varieties just have more health between the black, blue, and red ones. And then we have 4 Moldugas. For some reason, there's only 4 Moldugas in the game, and you get a medal for defeating them all. I have no idea why Lynels in this game didn't get a dedicated health bar to them, making them considered a mini-boss, because it would have made so much sense to me. I'm assuming the only way I can think of it is maybe they wanted them to feel, 1, more optional because they're difficult, and 2, maybe they wanted to catch players by surprise. By putting a Lynel there, has a normal health bar, players are like, oh, okay, that doesn't seem that hard, it's not a mini-boss, and then they get absolutely obliterated. That potentially could be a reason as to why they decided to do that. But I'm upset by that. I wish there was a medal for Lynels instead of Moldugas, because Moldugas kind of seem more optional and random, that you get a medal for only 4 of them, when you have to fight literally 40 of the other variety, like Hinoxes or Hinoxes, whatever you want to call them, and Taluses. So that's a change that I would have made personally, but the only explanations that I have for them not doing that is what I just said. Maybe there's a different reason that I can't think of. So why am I saying all of this? Tears of the Kingdom coming out soon, and I really hope bosses, and I really think, by the way, bosses will be a much stronger point. If there's new dungeons, let's say there's 7 dungeons for 7 tiers and maybe a final dungeon, I'm really thinking they're gonna have a different boss in, like a different boss design in each of them, completely different boss designs, kind of like in Skyward Sword or Twilight Princess. I will also say I'm a huge boss fight enjoyer. The Soul series is one of my favorite series. I absolutely love Shadow of the Colossus. I love the God of War games, the old ones, especially for their bosses. I love Twilight Princess for their boss designs. Boss fights are epic and cool. I haven't really ever played one of these, I mean, other than Shadow of the Colossus, but it's not really the same. There's a lot of games that are like essentially boss rushes, like you just only do boss fights. Dark Souls 2 is probably the closest to that, but again, I love the bosses in Hollow Knight. Bosses are just cool. Maybe some of you disagree, but I just love boss fights. And this game didn't satisfy my hunger for cool boss fights. And I really think not only Tears of the Kingdom will change that, they will probably have cooler bosses, but I'm not entirely sure, I will say, if the bosses are going to be more difficult. I don't know if they're going to go more difficult than Monk Moscotia, which, if you know what you're doing, can also be a pushover. But at least casually, I think that one gives you a fair challenge. I would really love if they had some additional super difficult boss fights, which a lot of games have done recently, from God of War with the Valkyries to Elden Ring with the optional bosses like Malenia and Moog. Something like that. I mean, there will definitely not be that sort of difficulty, but I would absolutely love that. That would add a lot of replayability to the game, and again, potential for cool challenge runs where you have to beat those really difficult bosses with very restricted equipment. That sort of stuff is always really fun to figure out. But yeah, those are kind of my main thoughts. So I really think the biggest weakness in Breath of the Wild is the game's boss variety, boss design, and gameplay around boss fights. I have strong hopes for Tears of the Kingdom to change that. I also wanted to quickly rant about my disappointment that for some reason you don't get a medal for defeating all of the Lynels. That still really doesn't make sense to me, because it would have been a great opportunity. And yeah, that is pretty much my rant about them. I will quickly make sure that I have already obtained the Korok seed in this well, which I have not. This is a very uncomfortable Korok seed to get, because there's 600 Lizalfos around you trying to make your life hell. So I'm gonna try to get that really quick while this guy is stunned. Oh, okay, so it's nighttime. We also got a Yiga soldier. This, honestly, pretty much encapsulates the experience of getting this particular Korok perfectly, so, you know. Oh, and electric keys as well. Great. That was a perfect showcase of how it feels to get this specific Korok in Breath of the Wild. I'm gonna go over there, grab this location if I haven't done that yet. There's a specific ruin location that you can only get by getting closer to the wetlands, and then we're gonna quickly check the percentage count for the day. I'm assuming we should be close to 37% now. Let's double check. So good progress done today. Okay, we are at 36.5. Good progress done today. I just quickly wanted to talk about my biggest complaint, or in my opinion, biggest weakness about Breath of the Wild. I've been thinking about this a lot recently because I am planning to replay Bloodborne once again. One of my favorite games. So yeah, with that out of the way, thank you guys for listening to my daily rant about Breath of the Wild and what I love and hate about it. Tears of the Kingdom comes out in 135 days. Let's see if the bosses get better. Thank you for watching, and I will see you tomorrow.